Hey, I'm Damon. I'm the designer of Wormwood. If you stumbled into this video, you have probably got some questions about what exactly Wormwood is, and if it's a collectible card game, or if it's something else. It's a sort of mishmash of the best parts of every 90s CCG that ever was, but it's not a collectible game, and it doesn't really play like any of those games. I'm going to talk right now about how it differs specifically from Magic and Netrunner. These are the two big games that this is going to be compared to. And a lot of people talk about Wormwood being like multiplayer Netrunner. It's a very different game and it is its own beast. So here we're going to learn about the differences between Wormwood and the two major peers that it's going to be compared to in your mind. Magic is the biggest CCG on the planet. It's unlikely to be dethroned anytime soon. I guarantee nearly everybody watching this has played Magic. And a lot of times, Magic players will try Wormwood. They'll attempt a strategy that they expect to work from Magic or similar CCGs and just get trounced by somebody who has never played a card game before. Because there are such different ideas about how to win or how to stay under the radar in Wormwood that just don't exist in Magic. So let's talk about a few of those and where this game really, really differs from how Magic is structured. Number one, land. So both Magic and Wormwood have a similar structure in your hand, where you also have some functional cards, a mixture of units, facilities, augments, and reflexes, but you'll also have a bunch of echoes, right? Echoes are all the same card. They're roughly similar to the distribution of lands in a Magic deck, and so you are going to end up in situations where you feel like you're going to get mana screwed in one way or other. You're going to get echo screwed. Either too many echoes or too few echoes. Now, when this happens in Magic, you are pretty much ruined. If you are mana screwed and you don't get enough mana or you get no mana, you can't do anything. You are crippled. And if you get too much mana, you also don't have any functional cards to play with the mana. You're equally crippled, your game ends, and you're going to have to try and just start again. Wormwood doesn't work this way. Wormwood, its resources are people and time. So your citizens here, you get two of these talents every turn. This is your primary resource in the game, and you're always going to get two every turn. Even if somebody manages to wipe out every card you have, you're still going to be getting just as many resources as you did to be rebuilding everything you need. So echoes they're not like land because they're not actually your economy. Echoes are the points in the game. You're not in situations where you are sacrificing life to get tempo because you don't have life. You can't get kicked out of the game. You can't get destroyed and lose life and then you're out. It's a race to the top. And so it's far more useful to maintain a constant and consistent pace, getting one or two echoes a turn, rather than building up a huge force that you might in Magic and then smashing through an opponent hoping to get, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 echoes all at one time. Remember, you need 10 echoes to win the game, but you're never going to find 10 echoes in one turn. Really important to understand compared to a game like Magic, where one of the differences between a novice player and a seasoned player is understanding that 19 lost health is meaningless, and that final 1 point of lost health is the only thing that actually matters. In Wormwood, you need to have a consistent way to get echoes somehow, because you're never going to get them all at one time, and by the midpoint of the game, it's going to be harder and harder to pinpoint where they are, and it's going to be taking more of your efforts to find them than it is to take them, than to actually fight somebody and steal them out of their stuff. Creatures in Magic versus units in Wormwood. So a unit in Wormwood has similar stats to a creature in Magic, but they work quite a bit differently. They both have attack, and attack works very similarly in both games, but there are two different sort of toughness stats for a unit in Wormwood. They have this armor stat here, and then they have health down at the bottom here. The health is slowly depleted as units fight each other and deal damage. So you might start with 3 health here, and then end up with 2, and then end up with 1. And it's only when that final health is destroyed that your unit is actually lost. But your armor here is going to deplete similarly to toughness in a Magic game. It depletes every time a source hits it. So this armor of 1 is going to subtract 1 from the attack of every unit that fights this thing. Now what's important with that is that in a game of Wormwood, you can't choose not to block. During your turn, you're setting up these lanes of units between 1 and 3 to defend your hand or forge, where you might be hiding points. But you can't choose not to block when somebody comes for one of those lanes. You're choosing who's going to be defending you and where they're going to be, but once that happens, those things are locked in stone, and when people come for you, they're going to know where the defenders are, and they're going to send the things that are appropriate to destroy them, right? Because of this, defenders have a serious advantage. In a large combat, your defenders can hit everything coming in, but your attackers can only deal their damage once. So attackers work quite a bit like creatures in Magic, but your defenders in Wormwood can do their damage again and again and again to every unit that's coming in to fight them. Another big difference between the units in Wormwood and the creatures in Magic is that nothing ever taps in Wormwood. Once you put a creature out, it also doesn't have summoning sickness, so it can attack immediately the first turn it's revealed from the forge. And this can be a huge deal later on in the game when someone might reveal 2, 3, maybe even 4 units, all at the same time, all on the same turn, that can then attack immediately. This is balanced by 2 things. Number 1 is that you can only ever attack from one lane to another, which means you can attack with a maximum of 3, and you can only ever attack one lane of one player. So if there are 3 players in the game, you're going to have to be very selective about who you're attacking, when, and why. The other thing is that other players are able to attack your forge and look inside, so they're able to see units you have under construction and prepare for them before they come out. That's up to them to remember what they've seen or trade that information, but units aren't nearly as hidden as they are in a game like Magic. You're not keeping your stuff a secret. You're trying to, but people are constantly looking at your hand and things that are face down. You're attempting to keep secrets at bay, but everyone is constantly aware vaguely of what you have and can give that information to other players and tell them what they've seen as well. So reflexes work very similarly to instants in Magic, but a reflex can stick around for an entire round sometimes. So reflexes are only discarded during your upkeep. So if you play them at the right time, a reflex can affect the turn of 3 other players before it gets back around to you. Sometimes they have an instant effect and that just occurs and then the effect stops, but a lot of times that effect can last for a while. The other thing is that reflexes don't cost mana or time or anything. They cost a number of citizens from your citadel that just sit on the reflex working it until your next upkeep, and then you get all of that back. And that makes reflexes remarkably cheap for how incredibly powerful they are. And this is only balanced out by the fact that every player only has 6 reflexes in their deck that they can play. So you know that if somebody has played 3, 4, or 5 reflexes, you can start to determine, okay, what do they have left potentially? You can also hit somebody, take some echoes from their hand, and look into their hand and see what reflexes they have to play. And that's also very different from Magic, where you don't know what instants are coming at you or what is possible to be played later on in the game. But in Wormwood, a lot of the time, you'll know half the cards your opponent has because you've already seen them. So if you can remember what reflexes they have, then you're going to be able to prepare for when they finally trigger. You also draw back up to 8 cards at the end of every turn. And this is really important to understand the difference between Magic and Wormwood, in that you're not running out of options. There's also no way to cause another player to mill out their deck. Now, before I talk about Netrunner, I'm going to talk about 2 things that affect both games that Wormwood was designed to correct so that multiplayer is its primary focus. Number 1 is player elimination. Wormwood has no player elimination. It's a race to the top, no one is eliminated, nobody can get kicked out of the game. This makes it so that everybody at the table has an equal chance of success over time, and that it's not like you have an incentive to kick one player out to make sure that they don't get stronger, and then kick another player out, and then kick a final player out, and finally win the game. A player that has 1 point to your 9 still has a very good chance of pulling back in if other players decide that they're going to rail on the first one, in order to keep them down while you get a little stronger in response. The other really important thing to understand is that every card in Wormwood is unique. You're never going to see the same card twice. So both Netrunner and Magic rely a lot on repeated cards so that you can predict what's coming to a certain extent. Those combos are somewhat predictable based on what cards you draw at the beginning of the game, which is why mulliganing in Magic is such an important part of starting out and getting a strong boost to the beginning, because if you can't get that combo going for whatever your deck is built to do, your deck's just going to stall and maybe fail. Wormwood doesn't work that way. You have 30 unique cards mixed into that deck, and once one's gone, you're never going to see it again unless you find a way to dig it back out of your scrap. So you can't rely on any specific combos that you haven't made in that game. Its tactical play is specific to the moment-to-moment gameplay and the board state which everybody has built in that game specifically. Because it's a singleton format, you're never going to see the same board twice, even if you and, 2 other players play the same faction again and again and again and again. With only 30 different cards, you are going to see completely different board states most of the time for hundreds of games. So don't rely on any given card in your deck and just decide that it's going to come up. It probably won't. You need to be relying on the cards that you got. You can't just mulligan and hope that you're going to get what you need, because none of these combos are built to be game-breaking. They're just built for tactical play, and positioning is far more important than getting exactly the right 2 cards. All right, next up, the elephant in the room, Netrunner. You might be really surprised to find out that I actually played Netrunner years after making most of the rule decisions for how Wormwood was constructed. The only real thing I changed after I played Netrunner was adding the ability to discard a card that you find in the hand if you don't find any echoes. That is the only rule that actually changed. So everything else sort of looks like Netrunner because the system is amazing, and it turns out that there are multiple ways to arrive at that conclusion, but the actual gameplay underneath was built without me ever even knowing that game existed. So here are some of the major differences in a game that looks very similar. So in Netrunner, you can have as many remote servers as you want, but in Wormwood, you can only have 2 lanes in front of you. One lane is defending your hand, that's in front of your leader card, and the other lane is defending your forge, that's in front of your citadel card. And those are the only 2 places where you can be hiding echoes. People can't attack your deck and search through that and find points. They can't search through your scrap and find points. You can't make traps to lead them astray. You're going to have to be playing this shell game between these 2 lanes to just try and keep their eye on wherever your echoes aren't. Now, echoes are roughly similar to agendas, but there are some pretty big differences. Number 1, every echo is the same. Echoes are all identical, unlike agendas, which are all different. Echoes don't have any particular abilities that they grant you. Once you have scored them, they are simply points that are moving you to the front of a race. So you can't baby your echoes. You have 20 of them. They're not like agendas, where if you have an agenda in front of you, that losing it is an absolute disaster. And many times, I might want a player to take 1 echo off in the corner so that I can save 2 echoes where they didn't look, right? I might want them to hit my hand and take a couple of echoes over here because I'm building 3 over in my forge and I need to keep them away from it. Echoes are more like a shell game than they are like agendas. And if you are freaking out every time you lose one, this is going to be a very stressful game. Don't worry too much when people start taking echoes at the beginning of the game, particularly in a multiplayer game. You don't want to be the person with twice as many points as everybody else, because they are going to smash you to dust, right? In Netrunner, you're always the target, right? If you're the corporation or the runner, you're always the target of the other player. But many times in Wormwood, a big part of your gameplay is going to be staying under the radar. Stay away from the fight. Don't get hit. Don't hit people who will hit you harder. That's pretty particular to Wormwood because it's a multiplayer game, and Netrunner is a 2-player game, where it's always aggression all the time, and just doing nothing is probably never the advantageous choice. So another thing Netrunner players will sometimes say to me on their first game is that they feel like the echoes should be worth variable amounts of points like agendas in Netrunner. In Netrunner, I really don't have enough experience with Netrunner to say if there are things worth more than 3 agenda points, because I've never seen one, but maybe there are. But that's a huge amount, right? 3 agenda points is 50% of what you need to win that game. And that can come out of nowhere. That can come from you randomly hitting the deck without any other information. This cannot happen in Wormwood. Wormwood is designed as a tactical game rather than a strategic game because I want to make sure that the game is always in flux and that anybody could potentially win at any time. You are never at a total loss in Wormwood. There's always an opportunity for a massive major comeback because you always draw back up to 8 cards, and because the variability of how many echoes could be in hand is only unpredictable if nobody's actually attacking you. The more you attack a player, the less echoes are available to you from that player, and the more likely you need to attack another player. Even in a 2-player game, the game is self-balancing. So if you hit somebody really hard and take a bunch of echoes out of their hand, the likelihood of the second turn you hit them really hard, providing you with the same echo boon, is very unlikely. The units that are defending your lanes are not like ice. They are predictable in that you can see what's coming, and when you attack them, you're going to know what's defending that lane, but there's not a whole lot of hidden information in those units. Most of the hidden information when it comes to combat comes from reflexes hidden in players' hands. They have 6 of those reflexes in their deck, and reflex powers are incredibly powerful. They can be annihilating, okay? They're far more like instants in Magic, and they can be played out of turn. So can abilities on the leader card, as well as facilities. Those abilities can be played out of turn, and that's where you're going to get trapped. That's where you're going to make a mistake, when you think that you have the upper hand because you can see everything in front of you, but all of their out-of-turn plays are where they're going to start destroying all of your units. They're going to be moving citizens in ways you don't necessarily predict. If you see them have a couple of extra drones or a couple of extra talents sitting on the Citadel, that means that there's a very good possibility they have a reflex in their hand that they're waiting to play when you come after them. Or if they're attacking you, they're waiting to see what you do so that they can play reflex and take out your units as well. Your economy in Netrunner is driven by clicks and credits. If you don't have enough clicks, well, you can't do anything. You don't have enough clicks to get what you need done. But same thing happens if you don't have enough credits, right? If you are out of credits, then you're using all of your clicks to try and get more money as fast as you can to rebuild yourself, to get more cards out, or to make runs, whatever you need to do in Netrunner. In Wormwood, everyone is getting 2 talents every turn. And a talent is almost like a combination of a click and a credit. A talent is a person. It's not money, so it's not spent. A talent moves between your Citadel and every other card in the game. Citadels act as these holding spaces for idle citizens. But if I want to use one, let's say I want to use this citizen to activate this ability on my leader card, I move the citizen to my leader card, it activates the ability, and on my next upkeep, I'm going to get that citizen back. You also need to be managing the health of your units, and they use the exact same tokens. So when I put a card into my forge, like so, if I reveal an echo, then it stays a talent, and I get to use it again, and my economy ramps up, and I got a point. But if I reveal something that isn't an echo, let's say I have a different card in Forge, the Forge card moves up and I'm able to reveal it. In this case, it's a unit. I flip over the token, and then I put it on that unit, and it acts as its health. So there's this constant cycling system of talents being utilized to create cards, then flipping, then becoming health for your military units, then defending you and attacking. It's all about tactical movement of cards and resources, not about stockpiling those resources and then spending them all at the right time. In Netrunner, there's a little bit of this economy scaling when you install more hardware, or you maybe put down a job for the runner, or assets or something for the corporation, but these tend to evaporate when they're used, right? You put down a card, it generates 10 credits, you use it the 10 credits, the card goes away. Facilities in Wormwood don't work that way. Facilities stick around usually forever, and they tend to provide benefits for the rest of the game. So getting a facility out early can often be a much bigger deal than getting a unit out early. And one of the final ways that Wormwood really differs from both Magic and Netrunner is that it isn't really a tournament game. It's designed to be played casually. It's designed to be played usually out of the box by people who want to tell stories. And it's made so that every matchup of factions and every unique interaction of cards creates a story that you can tell your friends and you can tell each other about what happened and the awful situation that these people got into. If you're obsessed with min-maxing the fun out of your games, this is going to be a hard one for you, because Wormwood is specifically designed at every possible turn to stop you from doing that. This was never designed to replace 2-player tournament games. I would consider it a much more interesting adjunct in the places where it shines. In places like multiplayer, this is going to be an awesome game. If you are really interested in 2-player games that last a little bit longer or have much higher variability, where you want to see weirder things happen rather than just test your deck against somebody else, but where your tactical strategy becomes really important, this is going to be the game for you. If you want a game where every card tells a story, this is the game. And you can tell the story about when you shot a monk out of a cannon onto a giant nightmare crab, and it can be told in as dark or as comedic a way as you want, because that all depends on exactly the situation that you shot the monk out of the cannon. And this is the kind of game that allows you to do that. And those kind of combinations pop up every game. Those kind of stories pop up every game. You're getting 400 different cards, none of which are commons. Imagine that every card is rare. If you have more questions, and you definitely will, because there's a lot of complexity in the game, you can always go on our Discord and ask questions there, where I will respond, or Cassandra will respond, or any one of our fans who are so dedicated to tearing this game apart will respond and explain to you how some of these cards work or interact. Take a look at our print and play. You can check out our Tabletop Simulator module. Sign up for our mailing list and find out exactly when our Kickstarter happens and when you can get the game on your table where you can play with your